David and Sarah Parker were the picture of the perfect American couple, living in a picturesque suburb of Portland, Oregon. David, a 42-year-old financial advisor, was known for his meticulous work ethic and his talent for solving complex financial problems. Sarah, 38, was a dedicated elementary school teacher who loved her students and volunteered at the local animal shelter. Their home was a charming single-family house, lovingly decorated and always well-maintained. Despite their affection and the apparent ideal of a perfect marriage, they had no children, as Sarah was unable to conceive due to health issues. This fact weighed heavily on both of them, but they found comfort in their mutual support. The couple had met 15 years earlier in a local supermarket. David, then an aspiring financial advisor, was looking for a specific wine for a company event when he accidentally bumped into Sarah's shopping cart. Sarah, who was picking out fresh vegetables, smiled at him kindly and helped him pick up the fallen bottles. It was this chance but friendly contact that led to a long conversation. They discovered many shared interests and soon agreed to a date. Their relationship quickly progressed, and they married after just 1 year. Their routine was characterized by mutual support and a harmonious daily life. However, in recent months, David had begun to withdraw. He was out more frequently in the evenings, claiming that he had to stay late at the office due to an important project. Sarah began to worry. David, who had always been known for his openness and reliability, suddenly stopped sharing details about his evenings. The change in David's behavior was gradual. It started with occasional overtime, which soon turned into regular late nights. Sarah noticed that David was increasingly hiding his phone when she entered the room and became nervous when she asked about his activities. The tension in their home grew steadily, and the once warm and open atmosphere was replaced by an air of distrust and discomfort. One evening when David came home late again, Sarah confronted him directly. She asked him what was wrong and if he was unhappy in their marriage. David avoided her gaze and mumbled a vague apology about stress at work. He admitted that he was struggling with something he didn't fully understand. Sarah tried to get him to talk, but David couldn't bring himself to tell her the truth. The shame and fear of her reaction were too great. Instead, he stammered another excuse about work stress and promised to spend more time with her. Sarah was not convinced but decided to trust him for the time being. She hoped that it was just a temporary phase and that David would soon return to her. Yet weeks went by, and David's behavior became increasingly mysterious. He spent more and more time alone in his study, often late into the night. Sarah could hear him speaking quietly on the phone, but when she approached, the conversation would abruptly stop. On a Saturday afternoon, when David was supposedly at the office, Sarah decided to surprise him with a homemade lunch. She packed his favorite dishes and went to his workplace. When she arrived, she found his office dark and empty. His secretary informed her that David had not come to work that day. Sarah's heart sank. The lie hit her like a blow to the face. She drove home, her mind racing. Where was David? What was he hiding from her? The worry and mistrust she had long suppressed now erupted with full force. When David came home that evening, Sarah confronted him again. This time, her voice was harsher, her eyes filled with tears of anger and disappointment. She demanded to know where he had been, as she had been to his office and knew he had lied. David paled. He stammered another excuse about a spontaneous appointment outside the office, but Sarah no longer believed him. She demanded the truth, but David remained silent, unable to reveal his secrets. Then one afternoon, while preparing David's shirt for washing, a small note fell out of his pocket. It was a receipt for the rental of a garage on the outskirts of town. Sarah stared at the paper, her heart racing. What was David hiding there? She confronted him again, this time holding the receipt. David tried to downplay the situation, claiming that he used the garage to store old furniture and tools. But Sarah felt there was more to it. She decided to get to the bottom of it. One evening, when David was once again out late, Sarah followed him secretly. She watched from a safe distance as he drove to the rented garage. The area was quiet, and access to the garage was only possible via a small private path. Sarah waited a few minutes after David had entered before deciding to follow him. With a pounding heart, she approached the door. She hesitated for a moment, unsure if she was truly ready for what she would find. Then, taking a deep breath, she knocked firmly on the door. Several seconds passed, feeling like an eternity. Then David opened the door, visibly surprised and unsettled. Sarah stepped inside, and what she saw left her in shock. The room had been transformed into a nursery, fully furnished with oversized diapers, pacifiers, baby clothes in adult sizes, and a crib. Toys and accessories meant for babies were scattered everywhere. In one corner, there were a camera and several USB sticks, which presumably contained the images David had been selling online. Sarah could not believe what she was seeing. Her breathing quickened, and she felt as though she had stumbled into a nightmare. The disbelief and shock left her initially speechless. David tried to find an explanation. He stammered that this was a private passion that had nothing to do with their relationship. He spoke of an inner urge he had long suppressed and how he finally found the courage to give in to this side of himself. Sarah, however, was unyielding. She felt deeply hurt and betrayed upon learning that David had taken pictures of himself in baby clothes and sold them online. The humiliation and pain overwhelmed her. She yelled at David, accusing him of destroying their life and their marriage. David pleaded for understanding, trying to explain that he needed help, that he was ashamed, and didn't know how to talk to Sarah about it. But his words did not reach Sarah. She was too hurt, too shocked by the discovery. In that moment, Sarah decided she needed distance. She told David that she would be going to her mother's house the next day to stay there temporarily and process the situation. David begged her to stay, to talk, but Sarah was determined. She needed time and space to sort her thoughts. That night, however, Sarah stayed with David to plan her next steps. When they returned home, they tried to talk again. David pleaded for forgiveness and promised to seek help and do everything he could to save their marriage. But Sarah was too devastated. She told David that she wanted to file for divorce. The thought of her husband leading a double life and presenting himself in compromising situations online was more than she could bear. The evening was filled with arguments and accusations, and the discussion led to no resolution. Sarah eventually retreated to the bedroom while David slept on the couch. In the stillness of the night, David lay awake, contemplating the impending consequences. The fear of losing his marriage, his career, and his reputation tortured him. He couldn't find peace, and the thoughts of the upcoming divorce and the public humiliation he would face drove him to despair. He felt helpless and desperate. As time went on, his panic turned into a dark determination. In a moment of utter despair and confusion, he decided to take drastic measures. The idea that took shape in his mind initially frightened him, but the longer he thought about it, the more it seemed to him the only way out. David got up, his heart racing. He took a pillow from the couch and quietly sneaked into the bedroom. Sarah was asleep deeply, her breathing steady and calm. For a moment he hesitated, looking at the face of the woman he had once loved so much. Then a wave of determination overcame him. With trembling hands, he placed the pillow over Sarah's face. He pressed it down firmly, his whole body tense with effort and fear. Sarah awoke under the weight of the pillow and immediately began to struggle. Her arms flailed wildly, trying to fend off her attacker, but David's grip was relentless. The seconds stretched into eternity. David could hear Sarah's muffled cries, felt her desperately gasping for air. He closed his eyes, unable to face the horror of his act directly. Sarah's attempts to free herself grew weaker, and after several excruciatingly long minutes, she stopped fighting. The room was filled with the oppressive silence, interrupted only by David's breathless sobs. Slowly, he removed the pillow from Sarah's face. Her lifeless body lay motionless before him, her eyes half open, staring blankly into space. In his state of complete despair, David knew there was no way out now. The deed could not be undone, and the consequences would be inevitable. After a few minutes of wrestling with himself, he finally picked up his phone and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. David confessed to the police officer on the phone that he had killed his wife. He answered the questions about the address and other details mechanically. The officer instructed him to stay at the scene and informed him that a response team was on its way. When the police arrived, they found David sitting next to Sarah's body. He made no resistance as they arrested him and put him in handcuffs. The officers secured the crime scene and began collecting evidence. David was taken to the police station, where he was interrogated for hours. During the interrogation, David confessed to his crime in detail. He talked about his secret passion, Sarah's discovery, and the fateful moment when he decided to silence her. The investigators were visibly shaken by David's confession and could hardly believe that the respected financial advisor was capable of such an act. In the following days, the police thoroughly searched the Parkers' home and the rented garage. They discovered the camera and USB sticks containing the compromising images. This revelation shocked not only the investigators but also the entire community. The news of David's secret life and the brutal crime spread like wildfire through the town. People who had known the couple were stunned. Parents of children Sarah had taught wept upon hearing the news. David's colleagues in financial consulting were aghast and quickly distanced themselves from him. The firm he worked for issued a statement expressing their horror at the crime and emphasizing that they had been unaware of David's activities. David's trial began several months later, drawing widespread public interest. The courtroom was packed every day as the grim details of the case were laid bare. The prosecution presented evidence of David's double life and argued that the murder was premeditated and cold-blooded. They showed images from the rented garage and detailed how David had hidden his secret life from Sarah and everyone else. David's defense team attempted to portray his actions as a result of a moment of madness, triggered by fear of public disgrace and career loss. They argued that David was mentally ill and needed treatment rather than punishment. They cited psychiatric evaluations and tried to present David's actions as a desperate act by a man struggling with deep inner demons. Throughout the trial, David mostly sat motionless, his gaze lowered. He appeared broken and showed little emotion, even when the most horrific details of his crime were discussed. The only time he seemed to display any emotion was when Sarah's mother testified, at which point tears welled up in his eyes. After a multi-week trial, the jury retired to deliberate. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as they returned to announce their verdict. David was found guilty on all counts. During the sentencing, the judge spoke of the severity of the crime and the need to protect society from such dangerous behavior. He emphasized that David's actions had not only ended Sarah's life, but had also irrevocably altered the lives of her family and friends. The judge sentenced David to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As David was led out of the courtroom, he was a broken man. The reality of what he had done and the consequences ahead of him seemed to finally sink in. He showed no visible reaction as he glanced at the weeping family members and shocked onlookers. The case of the Parkers left a deep scar in the community. People struggled to come to terms with what had happened, and the fact that behind the facades they saw every day often lay deeply hidden secrets. Sarah's death served as a tragic reminder of how crucial it is to be open and honest with one's partner, and the dangers of suppressing secrets and inner conflicts. David spent his days in prison, consumed by silent remorse. He participated in therapy programs, trying to understand and cope with his actions. But the knowledge of what he had done and the life he had destroyed would forever haunt him, a constant reminder of the devastating consequences of his choices. The Parkers' case remained a painful chapter in the town's history, a somber example of how quickly an apparently perfect life can spiral into tragedy. For many, it was a harsh lesson on the importance of communication and honesty in relationships, and the peril of keeping deep-seated issues and secrets hidden. What would have been the best solution for everyone? Let me know in the comments.